Well, I think it's time to start. Um, Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'm Vlad Bogin, CEO of Cromos Pharma, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you to our Mastering CTIS webinar. So before we move to the technical content, just a couple of words about Cromos. We're a privately owned international CRO that is US-based. We've been around for 21 years. We've conducted over 400 clinical trials in more than 70 indications across 3,500 sites with 130,000 patients involved. Our strengths are in our US-based capabilities that we combine with significant presence in all of Europe, Central Asia, and Turkey. And we habitually recruit at 2-3 times the average, and backed by our unique risk-sharing program called No Patients, No Payment, where essentially you do not pay unless we deliver. So CTIS or CTR was designed to simplify submissions and bring true harmonization across EU member states. But anyone who has worked with CTIS, especially in the early days, knows that reality has been much more complex. Instead of a smooth rollout, we were faced with shifting guidance, country-specific quirks that made this process anything but straightforward. For us, it was a real test of adaptability, but we rolled with the punches. We built a dedicated regulatory team. We trained them to really an expert level and refined how we do things through real-world experience. And we believe this investment truly paid off. Today, Cromos is among the most effective CROs with EMA presence and for EMA submissions under CTR. We've successfully guided dozens of multi-country trials through CTIS, and we've helped a number of sponsors avoid delays and reduce the unnecessary RFIs. So briefly, what are we going to be talking about today? We'll start with practical guidance on how to use CTIS in real-world submissions. You'll hear about our strategies that have been true and tested in multi-country trials, and we'll also talk about pitfalls and how to avoid them. We'll look at how to manage RFIs so timelines stay intact, and clarify the roles of EU legal rep and qualified person, which are quite important. And because member states still differ in their expectations, we'll highlight some country-specific nuances that can impact success. And at the end, we'll wrap it with a Q&A session. So feel free to present your questions. I'll talk about this in a little bit. Now that we've talked about the goals, let me quickly introduce the team that will guide you through today's presentations. Dr. Marina Romanova is our head of regulatory affairs, and she will talk about CTIS navigation and multi-country submissions, and really trying to simplify the process and turn it from a maze to a really structured routine. Olga Kodatska is a senior regulatory manager, and she will talk about lessons learned in real-world RFIs, including how to stay on track when timelines are truly tight. Monika David is our EU regulatory lead, and she will focus on legal representative and qualified person roles, which are critically important for compliance across member states. As we go through today's session, please feel free to submit your questions at any time using our QA box at the bottom of your screens, and we'll do our best to cover as many questions as possible. If something comes to mind afterwards, please feel free to reach out to us via email at inquiry@chromospharma.com. And before we dive in, we're going to do a quick poll just to kind of get the pulse of the room. We'll ask you about how familiar you are with CTIS. Have you done any submissions at all? Are you just starting? Are you an expert in this field already? And we truly thank you for weighing in. Okay, so here's our poll, and it looks like we have more than, or around half of our audience that is just starting, and there's some that are intermediate, and we have essentially no one who's truly advanced. This truly helps us tailor our presentation, and we will, keep it practical and fast-paced so everyone leaves with something useful. Let's start with our first speaker, Dr. Marina Romanova. Marina, please take the floor.
Hello, Vlad. Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'm Marina Romanova, Head of Regulatory Affairs Department at Cromos Pharma. And let's begin the first part of our webinar, where we will take a closer look at CTIS portal interface, how it works, how to navigate it, and some best practices. Before we dive into the details, it is important to understand what CTIS is and why it matters. CTIS is the main online system in Europe for clinical trial application and management. Introduced under the clinical trial regulations, it replaced the older clinical trials directive. It unites all member states under one and a single process, makes trial information more accessible to the public, and simplifies managing studies across multiple countries. Since January 2023, all new clinical trials in Europe must be submitted through CTIS. Let's look at how the application is structured in CTIS. Each submission is divided into two parts. Part 1 contains the scientific documents, which is reviewed jointly by all participating countries. And Part 2 contains the ethics and national level documents, reviewed separately in each country. Now, let's get familiar with the main areas of CTIS you will use regularly. You can see clinical trial overview is where you search by trial number, sponsor, country, or therapeutics area, and check the trial status in real time. Notice and alert section is where you receive validation feedback and request for information, which must be answered within 12 days. User administrator section is for managing accounts and roles, and annual safety reporting is where you submit your annual safety report within 60 days of the data lock point. Before you can use CTIS, your organization must be listed in EMA Organization Management System, OMS. To do this, you need to go to EMA's portal, select Organization Management System, and search for your company. If it is not listed, click Request for New Organization, Request New Organization, and fill in details, company names, address, registration number, email, and attach official documents such as Certificate of Incorporation. EMA typically confirms registration within 3 to 5 working days. Once your company in OMS, next step is set up a sponsor administrator in CTIS. You need to log into EMA Identity Access Management portal or create an account if you don't have one. Search for your organization, request sponsor administrator access, and upload a signed letter of authorization from your legal representative, along with any required ID. EMA may contact the sponsor to verify your request. After getting approval, of your request, the sponsor administrator can log in into CTIS and go to user access section to add new users. You can assign specific roles and permission for individual trials or for the whole organization. Let's walk through the steps of creating a new trial into CTIS. From the dashboard, you can click on Create New Trial. System, CTIS, will automatically assign a EU trial number. This number became a reference for all future submissions and must also be included in the protocol. The first step is to choose a reporting member state. This country will lead Part 1 review. After that, you can add other participating countries, member state concerned. Next, upload your Part 1 documents, followed by the country-specific Part 2 documents. Once everything is in place, you will go through the 3 final steps. Click Validate to check for any errors, then lock the application, and finally submit your initial application. If you need to give access to external users like CRO, vendors, the first step is to have them create an email account. Once that's done, as a sponsor administrator, you can go to User Access Management, select either trial or organization scope, and then assign the appropriate roles. For example, you might assign roles such as applicant submitter or Part 1, Part 2 prepare, depending on the task you will be responsible for. It is also important to understand the main roles in CTIS. CTIS administrator manages users and roles and can oversee all processes within the system. Application submitter is responsible for creating and submitting application. ISR submitter, annual safety report submitter, prepares and submits annual safety reports. Part 1 prepare upload the scientific documents. Part 2 prepare upload the national documents, such as informed consent form, site documents, insurance. And finally, there are also additional roles available for tasks like result submission and notifications. When coordinating a multi-country submission in CTIS, here is how the process works. First, start by selecting a reporting member state. This country will lead your Part 1 assessment. Next, add the member states concerned. These are additional countries that will take part of this trial. Submit a single application that covers all of the selected countries together. Upload your documents. Part 1 package, which harmonized for all member states, and Part 2 document, which is adapted nationally for each country. Once submitted, CTIS automatically distributes the dossier to the selected countries. Behind the scene, it is critical to align with your internal teams, both for translations and for the submission timelines. And finally, to be prepared for parallel validation and RFI rounds, since multiple countries will be reviewed at the same time. When coordinating a multi-country submission, it is also important to understand the different roles of the reporting member states and member state concern, as well as how communication happens between them. Reporting member state leads the Part 1 scientific assessment. It is also responsible for coordinating the evaluation timeline, managing RFIs, and prepare the draft Part 1 assessment report, which is then shared with the other member state, with the other countries. Member state concerned participate in the Part 1 assessment and at the same time conduct their own Part 2 assessment. This covers local requirements such as ethics committee documents, insurance, other country-specific forms and items. Each member state then provides its own feedback and final decision. Finally, strong collaboration and communication is key. Reporting member states integrates comments from all member state concerned. During the Part 1 review, member state concerned can raise questions if needed. Once consensus is reached, the reporting member state issues the harmonized Part 1 decision for our study, and this is followed by individual Part 2 approvals from each member state concerned. Now I think that it is a poll time, and our next question is about your personal experience with CTIS. Have you personally registered in CTIS to perform submission? Please select the option that best describes your situation. Poll now is open, and you have 20 seconds to respond. Okay, I guess we can close the poll and see how many of us already registered in CTIS and how many rely on colleagues or CRO. 8% registered and actively submitted. It is great. 12% registered but not submitted. And 58% rely on colleagues or CRO. That's how a lot of companies handle it. And for 22%, it's not applicable. So thank you so much for your participation and for your replies. That's the end of my part on the CTIS portal. Now I head over to my colleague, Olga Kodatska, Senior Array Manager, who will guide you through the RFI phases and share how to manage them effectively.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Today we'll briefly walk you through the concept of CTA RFIs, what they are, when they occur, and what they mean for the clinical trial submission process. A CTA RFI stands for Clinical Trial Application Request for Information. It is a formal request issued optionally by the reporting member state or a member state concerned during the evaluation of a clinical trial application. These requests typically arise when regulators need some clarifications, additional data, or supporting documents before they can proceed with their assessment. And it is important to note that not all applications receive RFIs. In some cases, the dossier can be considered complete and the process moves forward without need for further input. So if no RFI is raised or after all RFIs are responded, conclusion and decision on submission is issued. It is worth noting that requests for information may arise during a clinical trial life cycle. So this includes ad hoc assessment, corrective measures, and annual safety reporting. RFIs can occur at different stages of the evaluation process and may affect timelines if not responded and addressed accurately. So the validation phase is the first checkpoint after submission. Here, RFIs are basically raised if required documents are missing, incomplete, don't meet format or content expectations. During Part 1, the focus is on scientific and safety evaluation of a trial. RFIs in this phase are usually raised by the reporting member state. Part 2 is assessed by each member state concerned individually and focuses on ethical and national requirements. Validation. So during validation, the regulatory authority performs a formal check to ensure that application is complete and meets submission requirements. An RFI may be raised within 10 calendar days from the date of submission. Once an RFI is raised during the validation period, overall timeline for validation is extended. Specifically, a 15 days extension is automatically applied to allow time for the sponsor to prepare the response and competent authorities to re-review the updated submission dossier. So this helps to maintain regulatory compliance while offering flexibility for corrections. After receiving an RFI, a sponsor has a maximum 10 calendar days to respond. A complete and timely response is essential, so if the sponsor fails to respond within this time frame, the application may be considered not validated and closed. During the assessment phase, regulators have to up to 45 calendar days to raise an RFI after receiving the application. This applies to both Part 1, Scientific and Safety Evaluation, and Part 2, Ethical and Local Compliance Evaluation. And when an RFI is issued, a total timeline for the submission is and review is 31 days extension. And this period is split into two parts. 12 days allocated for the sponsor to prepare and submit the response, and additional 90 days for competent authorities to access the responses. And it is critical for sponsors to submit the complete and timely response with this 12-day window to wait for the delays or negative outcomes. Here are examples of how validation RFIs look in the system. And these RFIs may be issued during the validation step of the review. It is worth noting that there can be one or sometimes two rounds of RFI issued within a certain time frame during the validation. And this is mainly to ensure that application dossier is complete and administratively acceptable before the process. Sponsors are required to provide the response within 10 calendar days. And most validation RFIs focus on dossier completeness, administrative and invoicing issues. So, for example, in some countries as Romania, payment commitment is submitted initially with a dossier, and then the invoice is issued only during the validation step of review. For example, Slovakia issues invoice only during validation period. So that can be different, and there are, how to say, country specifics. Additionally, there is a potential risk of incorrect invoicing amount, and RFI can be raised on this. Or one more thing, during initial submission of the study is reporting member state related payment. So it is also becomes available only during the validation period. One more thing is that some technical errors can be identified within a dossier, and this is usually corrected within validation step. As a response to validation RFI, sponsors may need to upload new documents, remove documents, provide updated versions of documents, of the existing documents. And it is important that sponsor must complete all responses fields in each RFI point and provide a detailed list of changes if the application has been modified. Part 1 and Part 2. After successful validation, RFIs may be raised during assessment phase. So, as was mentioned, Part 1 RFIs are usually issued by the reporting member state, and Part 2 RFIs by each member state concerned individually. And typically, there may be one or more than one round of RFIs within a defined period during the assessment. And Part 1 and Part 2 review is run in parallel across different member states, so sponsors should be prepared for multiple requests at the same time frame. And some countries have specific requirements on documents upload, and not following this may be a reason for RFI during Part 2 assessment. For example, Poland and Ireland may require particular document format or additional documentation upload. And sponsors need to be aware of these local specifics and comply with national requirements for Part 2 documents upload to avoid any delays. And as well as for validation RFIs, sponsors as a part of response may need to upload new documents, remove some documents, or provide updated versions of existing documents. And these documents are uploaded either directly into the dossier or at the RFI response page, depending on the type of the document. And technical requirements for Part 1, Part 2 responses are the same as for validation. Responses fields completion is a must for each RFI point, and a list of changes to application is required to be submitted if the application was changed. Part 1 RFIs can have impact on Part 2, especially when changes in the protocol trigger updates in other documents. For example, if Part 1 RFIs require changes to the study protocol, it can often result in the need to update informed consent forms or other local documents that are a part of Part 2 dossier. And it is important to understand that Part 1 RFIs that are typically focused on scientific and safety aspects may lead to requests for additional RFIs for Part 2, and sponsors may send this request to competent authorities for RFI raising. So not only the system gives these RFIs, but sponsor can initiate this process as well. And to assist sponsors in timely submitting of high quality Part 1 and Part 2 documents, EMA provides a list of regulatory authorities across member states to be contacted. So you can see on this slide representing countries with contacts for Part 1 and Part 2 questions to be raised, and this information is publicly available in current version of clinical trial regulation questions and answers document. Here we are showing you some examples of RFIs with fields completed. So you can see consideration number reference to a part of the dossier that this RFI is for, then consideration, a detailed consideration number, RFI itself, sponsors response, and additional field for documents that can be supportive for the for this RFI response. How to search and view an RFI. All information related to RFIs can be accessed only within CTIS. So this centralized system ensures that sponsors have a clear and secure way to track and manage RFIs through the clinical trial application process. So basically, sponsor users have 3 convenient ways to access RFIs in CTIS. So first one is RFI tab. This is a dedicated tab showing all RFIs related to sponsors trials. So all RFIs for all trials are listed there. Then notices and alerts tab, where sponsors receive all important notifications about RFIs and other updates. So it is present on slide on the left side. You can see it. And the third way is CTA page of a specific clinical trial. So this is direct access to RFIs linked to individual clinical trial application. And this information is available in evaluation section. It is highlighted. And yeah. Then when all required documents and clarifications are uploaded and RFI response is submitted. So the person responsible for the submission can upload everything, click submit, click confirm, and then RFI will be regarded as responded. After submitting this response, sponsor can monitor the status by visiting Notices and Alerts tab in CTIS. And this tab provides a clear notice that and confirmation that a response has been sent to relevant member state concerned. And it is important to note that all communication between member states and sponsors is secure and takes place only within CTIS. No email notifications or messages will be sent by the system outside of CTIS. And this approach gives secure and transparent communication through the clinical trial application process. Let's highlight some common pitfalls related to documents formatting during RFI responses and share some practical tips how to avoid them and to ensure smooth, competent authorities review. So, firstly, documents must be submitted. It is advised that they are to be submitted in a searchable format, such as Word files or original PDFs with option to search for the text. And for some countries, as was mentioned, this requirement is mandatory, and failing to comply can be a reason for RFIs raised. Then proper version control is essential, and documents should clearly indicate the date and version number where applicable. This helps to identify the most recent relevant documents quickly and is good for tracking purposes. When applicable, sponsors should provide public or clean versions of document without track changes or tracked versions showing edits for transparency. This might be needed depending on the document type, so being aware of document requirements is important. Comment section is also a very good tool, and this is a place where we can provide additional clarifications. So we in Cromos actively use it for example, to explain the change of the checked version from one document to another, or to comment when the date is not present in the document itself, or to give a link to appropriate submission type. Then what is important that there is official naming convention tool, and it is recommended, highly recommended, to use the most recent version of this document. So this is a very good support to avoid the incorrect document naming that also may be a reason for RFI. Sponsors additionally must use the correct action in CTIS, adding a new document for entirely new files and adding new version of a document when they are updating the existing file. And before submission and through dossier quality control is critical. Checking for format compliance, correct versions, naming, proper uploading, and completeness of the dossier will significantly reduce the risk of technical RFIs. So that is all for RFIs topic for today, and we can move to the next presentation. Country by country deep dive. So, clinical trial regulation harmonizes submissions across EU by establishing equivalent requirements for member states involved in a clinical trial. That means that sponsors submit a single unified dossier with Part 1 documents that apply to all countries participating in the study. And this is like very positive from previously submitted approach with separate submissions. And CTR also introduces defined timelines for each step and each stage of application assessment. These timelines cover validation, Part 1, Part 2 assessment, request for information handling, and sponsors can use these projections to better plan all types of upcoming submission and to have a field for appropriate resource allocation. Another key element of CTR is transparency rules. So recent updates aim to reduce the amount of redacted information, meaning fewer documents require blinding. So as of now, blinding is applicable for protocol-related documents, patient-facing documents, recruitment arrangements, informed consent form, SMPC, and so. And there is no need to blind such documents as investigator's brochure, GCP documentation, site-level documents, and insurance documents. This gives openness while still protecting confidential and personal information. So this is like a positive changes within new CTR system for the for this recent year. And to sum up, sponsors must remain of these requirements to prepare documents accordingly. And basically, however, and while CTR harmonizes many aspects of clinical trial submissions across the EU, there are still key areas where national interpretation and requirements remain dominant. Let's outline these areas to help you navigate country-specific expectations. So one significant area of national variation is payment requirements. So this includes differences in whether clinical trials are free of charge, such as France, whether there is a requirement for payment commitment as Romania, or if there are different local invoicing procedures. So there can be 1, 2, or even 3 different invoices, and sponsors must ensure compliance with each member state expectations for proceeding in a proper way. Additionally, OrderLex Volume 10 provides basic templates and clinical trial guidelines, but these are often modified locally. Countries adopt these templates to meet their own regulatory and ethical standards, so sponsors must be prepared for country-specific variations. And site-related documents also vary by country, and here are the examples. Protocol signature page is required to be submitted only in a few countries. Declaration of interest is not applicable for some countries. Site suitability form for this document, there are various formats and modifications, so that really differs from country to country. List of participating sites can be needed for the submission. It can be requested in English, in local language, or in both languages. Documentation for PI experience, principal investigator experience, also may differ from country to country. And there are national differences in technical requirements and how the dossier must be uploaded into CTIS. For example, Poland expects documents to be uploaded in the dossier directly, even if that is part of RFI responses for particular documents. And finally, financial and other arrangements section is filled with documents according to local requirements and expectations, and may include budget agreements, contracts, brief description of study funding, and that really depends from country to country. And here you can see examples of language and translation requirements. So, for example, cover letter is a must to be submitted in English and Hungarian for Hungary, and it is not so strict for Poland, Romania, Czech Republic. Labels in English and Romanian is expected to be submitted in Romania, and so on. Synopsis in English and Hungarian, and in English and Romanian is applicable for Hungary and Romania. So this information is also publicly available and is present in the OrderLex for all countries. So it is, to say, easy to understand and proceed in a proper way. And here are some examples of country-specific challenges. So, for example, Hungary. EMA templates are not needed for the submission. Protocol signature page for each PI is to be provided. Declaration of interest is not required. PI CV and site suitability form are Hungarian specific, and they are expected to be uploaded. Insurance policy is not needed for the submission, and certificate only is acceptable. And what is worth noting that in Hungary, according to our experience, direct communication with competent authorities is not prohibited. So that is why we, if Hungary is participating, we usually select this country as a reporting member state for our projects. Romania. For Romania, all local templates instead of EMA templates are expected to be used. List of sites is a must for the submission. It includes PI name, position, site number of subjects, and so on. And as was mentioned, payment commitment is a Romanian specific as well. Bulgaria. Bulgaria also has some local specific requirements. So, for example, EudraLex templates are all adapted. PI-CV is acceptable to be submitted in English now. Bulgarian is optional. For about a year and a half ago, both documents were requested to be submitted, but now English one is acceptable. Site stability form, this document is bilingual. List of sites is a must, both English and Bulgarian versions. In PI-CV, unique identification number of and doctor's diploma is to be listed, and not having this also can be a reason for RFI. What is specific in Bulgaria as well, that master version of ICF is needed for the submission. It is not requested for most of other countries, but for Bulgaria, it is what is expected. And also country-specific versions, not only in local language, but in English as well. List of sites and PIs needs to be listed in insurance documents, and insurance certificate is either translated or bilingual. Spain. For Spain, site suitability forms all are site-specific. So every site is using its own template, and that so you can't find two the same. PI-CV is submitted in English, so there is no need to submit it in local language. List of sites and list of PIs is needed to be incorporated in insurance documents. And what is important within payments, that the invoice is valid only for 30 days. Otherwise, it will be expired without possibility to return these costs. So. And to sum up, you can see that submission requirements differ across member states. So both EU level and national requirements meeting this all will help to minimize delays and reduce the likelihood of RFIs. And now you can see polls here. Let's take a moment to reflect on how and what is your current experience with RFIs. So we would appreciate if you respond to the question, on average, how many RFIs have you received per one submission in CTIS? I think we can close this poll and see the results. None so far is the winner. 1, 2, 3, 5 gained almost the same percentage, and the last one is more than 5, 15%. So assuming that in response to previous poll, it was stated that someone of you has not registered in CTIS, so none so far is understandable why this was selected. But as we can see, RFIs are common occurrence through different and multiple submissions, and we do hope that insights and information shared today will support you in strengthening the quality of your future submissions and potentially reduce the number of RFIs you receive. So thank you for your attention, and now I'll pass the floor to our EU Array Manager, Monika David. She will present information about roles and responsibilities of legal representative, and will focus on QP-GMP documentation requirements. Monika, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Olga. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So let's begin with the basic legal requirement under the CTR. Under the EU clinical trials regulation, sponsors outside the EU must appoint a legal representative based in the EU, European Union, or the European Economic Area. The legal representative must understand the CTR and good clinical practice rules. This is not just a box-ticking exercise. The appointment ensures that the sponsor has a legally accountable counterpart within the EU who can directly interact with regulatory authorities and take responsibility if issues arise. In practice, this means that the legal rep may be the official addressee of regulatory correspondence, must be able to respond promptly and demonstrate thorough knowledge of the applicable regulations. The appointment is therefore not only a formal requirement, but also a safeguard for compliance, data integrity, and patient protection. Sponsors should select a legal representative with proven regulatory expertise and not view this role as merely administrative. Okay, now but we have covered the requirement, let's look at what can go wrong in practice and how to avoid it. When we talk about the role of EU legal representative, it's important to recognize where problems usually occur. In practice, issues arise, for example, when the sponsor assumes the legal rep is only there to sign papers. Another common pitfall is when the contract does not clearly define the legal representative's responsibilities. Problems also happen if the legal rep is not involved in the trial or does not know the rules well enough. And finally, some EU countries may impose extra requirements, so legal rep also needs to be aware of local laws. So how can these issues be avoided? First, sponsors should select a legal representative who truly understands the CTR and GCP. It is also essential to make sure their role is clearly written in the contract, so there is no ambiguity. Keeping the legal rep actively involved throughout the trial is another safeguard against compliance gaps. And of course, it is always wise to check if the country where the trial takes place has any additional rules that must be followed. By doing these things, the sponsors and legal representative can work together effectively, ensuring everything is done correctly and on time. The CTR establishes legal accountability and communication responsibilities, meaning the legal rep serves as the accountable legal entity within the EU, sharing responsibility with the sponsor for compliance and patient safety. Next, let's turn to GMP documentation requirements. In the EU, the use of medicinal products in clinical trials is strictly regulated. If a sponsor intends to bring a product manufactured outside the EU into the EU, they must engage with a company that holds a valid importation authorization. This company can provide detailed guidance on the specific documents required for regulatory compliance. This section outlines the key documentation required for clinical trial submissions under the EU clinical trial regulation and the responsibility of the qualified person. The manufacturing importing authorization, MIA, is mandatory when investigational medicinal products are manufactured within the EU or imported into the EU. It is issued by the national competent authority and confirms that the site operates under EU GMP standards. For EU manufacturing sites, the GMP certificate is required if the site has already been inspected and certified by the national competent authority. It proves that the site consistently meets EU GMP standards. For non-EU manufacturing sites, the QP declaration must be submitted. This declaration, made by a qualified person, certifies that the batch complies with EU GMP standards and is safe for use in clinical trials. The QP declaration should be issued by the MIA holder. Authorities will check the validity of the MIA and GMP certificate against the information available in the UDRA GMDP database. So it is critical that the entries are current and consistent. The QP declaration is one of the most common reasons for delays. It must be batch-specific or at least study-specific. A declaration from a different study or an outdated batch will not be accepted. This means that each clinical trial application must contain a fresh, valid QP declaration explicitly referring to the batches intended for the trial. It's also important to highlight that authorities may raise questions if the documentation provided does not match what is listed in UDRA GMDP. Proactive checking is strongly advised since sponsors who fail to align these documents often face requests for information that slow down approval timelines. Now let's take a closer look at what the qualified person is actually responsible for. The qualified person plays a central role in ensuring compliance. The QP is responsible for clarifying each batch of IMPs, ensuring that manufacturing follows approved specifications, maintaining detailed documentation, and overseeing storage and transport conditions. In many EU countries, the QP also bears personal legal responsibility, in some cases even criminal liability for product quality issues. That's why QPs are extremely cautious and expect complete verified documentation well in advance of submission. Early engagement with the QP is crucial, not just 1 week before submission, but ideally months earlier. This gives time to resolve issues around manufacturing sites, documentation, and testing data. The QP is the gatekeeper for product quality and patient safety, and without their clearance, the IMP cannot be used. Understanding when and why each document is required and the QP role is in this process is essential for a compliant and successful clinical trial submission. Of course, there are also common misunderstandings that often cause delays. A common misunderstanding is believing that the GMP certificate from a non-EU site is sufficient. It is not. If manufacturing is outside the EU, a QP declaration is always required. This is because the QP must independently verify that EU standards are met regardless of where manufacturing takes place. Another mistake is assuming one QP declaration can cover multiple studies. In reality, it must be tailored for each specific clinical trial. The QP must confirm the IMP intended for one trial, not reuse declarations from another. Finally, sponsors often underestimate the role of the legal representative, considering it purely formal. In fact, the legal rep shares accountability with the sponsor under the regulation and must be treated as an active stakeholder. These recurring misunderstandings often lead to RFIs, which delay submissions unnecessarily. By addressing them upfront, sponsors can significantly shorten approval timelines. Finally, let's close with some best practices for avoiding these issues altogether. These mistakes often happen because the rules are complex and not always easy to understand. But if the wrong documents are submitted, it can delay the trial or cause problems with approval. To avoid this, involve the importer or QP early so they can support planning and ensure regulatory compliance. Clarify the role of each document and when it needs to be submitted. If you are unsure about any requirement, consult the authorities as early as possible. The best practice is early involvement of the QP, ideally months before CTIS submission, to avoid delays or additional information requests from authorities. This ensures that all manufacturing and quality documentation is ready and validated on time. Another best practice is keeping a central tracker of all GMP documents, MIA GMP certificates, QP declarations, to ensure validity and easy access. Such trackers help identify expiring certificates or missing declarations in advance. And most importantly, maintain transparent communication between sponsor, legal representative, and QP. This three-way collaboration helps avoid surprises and ensures a smooth submission process. In practice, companies that have routine alignment meetings between these three roles tend to see fewer last-minute issues and fewer regulator queries. This helps make sure everything is done right and on time. We have reached the end of my presentation. It's time for a poll. I would like to hear from you. In your experience, which GMP documents causes the most challenges in clinical trial submissions? Manufacturing import authorization, GMP certificate, or QP declaration? Okay, thank you. I think we can close the poll. Let's see the result. Oh, yes. I see that most of you find the QP declaration to be the biggest challenge, and that absolutely matches my own experience. It is often the document that triggers RFIs and delays, which is why early involvement of the QP is so critical. We can close it. Yes, thank you very much for sharing your input. I hope you found this session helpful. Now I would like to hand over to Vlad to continue with the Q&A session.
Hi guys. So unfortunately, we ran out of time. There's been a few questions asked, but I think what we'll need to do is to follow up individually with each participant who submitted the questions, and we will do so electronically. We will also post this webinar on our website. And also, as I've mentioned earlier, if you have any additional questions or you come up with additional questions, please feel free to email us. Here's actually a QR code that you can use to connect with us instantaneously. I would like to thank our presenters for sharing their insights today. We hope that this was useful. And again, we're always at your service. Should you have any additional questions, or if you need a consultation, feel free to reach out to us at any time. And with this, we would like to close this webinar. And once again, thank you so much for your participation and your time today. Thanks a lot.